Hello and welcome to another edition of 9 to 5 Live. My name is Mark Williams and joining me is Wilhelm Magelssen of NRP Maritime Asset Management. Wilhelm, hello.
Hi, Mark.
Thank you for joining us. Wilhelm, you are the fund manager of a shipping fund, Premium Maritime Fund. You've been managing this fund since 2017, and in fact you're launching your third fund in September. So who better than yourself to explain to us the business of shipping at the moment and what we can expect in terms of future developments in the shipping market? Now, when we talk about the way you invest in shipping, what are we really talking about?
Yeah, hi, Mark. Thanks for having me, first of all. When we invest in shipping in the Premium Maritime Fund, we are what we call a co-investment fund. So we buy ships together with operational and industrial ship owners. So we don't buy shares or anything in the paper market. We buy the actual physical ships. So we can buy anything from 25 to 50% of a single ship, and then we bundle them together in a portfolio of 30 to 35 ships, which then comprises the fund.
And therefore, you're not really financing shipping. You are directly investing. You are equity investors within the shipping business then.
Correct. So we are pure equity.
First of all, in order for us to understand the dynamics of the shipping business, let's go through some of the things that affect the cost of shipping prices. What is the main driver of shipping costs for the person wishing to ship something from A to B?
Yeah, so shipping is what you call a perfect market. So every shipment is almost subject to an auction. So it's a pure result of supply and demand. And supply of ships is obviously comprised of the number of ships available at any given time, their carrying capacity, and how fast they can go. In addition, you have port efficiency and items like this. The demand is obviously driven by the cargo volume, which is driven by the amount of people demanding whatever you are shipping. So is it demand for oil? Is it demand for iron ore? Is it demand for containerized goods like iPads, your sneakers, your clothes? 90% of everything in the world is carried on a ship. So demand is obviously very closely linked to the world GDP development, which again is very closely linked to population development. If you look at the last 20 years, you've seen a little bit of a shift because 20 years ago, global demand was driven very much by the OECD countries. But today, I think the developing world is more than 60% of demand for shipping already, and the growth is obviously coming from there. So that trend will only continue. So it's the shipping costs is derived by supply and demand. So how many ships available against how much demand is it for whatever cargo they are carrying.
And therefore, I imagine it's a market that's never in equilibrium. There's always either too many ships or too few ships, or maybe the wrong type of ships. Why is that?
I think it's two reasons. Obviously, for the commodities they transport themselves has a natural seasonality in demand. So, for instance, fuel oil there's a higher demand for fuel oil certain parts of the year than other because it's used for heating, it's used for driving fuel. So you have driving seasons. So it's not a uniform demand for whatever commodity you are talking about. Secondly, if you want to build a ship, it can take you everything from 2 to 4 years, depending on the ship itself and how busy the yards are. And ship owners tend to construct ships at the same time. So you have, in different periods, you have different concentrations of new deliveries, which again makes it ununiform, the supply side as well. In addition to that, you obviously ship has a limited lifetime. So in shipping, commodity shipping, you reckon that a ship has a life between 20 and 25 years. And obviously in the poor market, more ships are leaving or being recycled at the same time, and in a good market, fewer. So you have a supply side that is a moving part, but it's demand side as well, where the demand for whatever goods ships are carrying is not uniform across the year.
Talking about the replacement cycle of shipping, is there statistics on the age of the global shipping fleet at the moment, and how does that compare to 10, 15 years ago?
Well, the good thing about shipping is that you have statistics for everything. It's a very transparent industry, and it's global, but it's few people, and it's a limited number of yards and limited number of ship owners. So the brokers and the analysts, they have a pretty good overview of what's going on. So it's if you look at the order books, which you typically measure as a percentage of the fleet. So if you say that the order book is 20% of the sailing fleet, it means that for every 10 ships that are on the water, you have two being under construction. The average over time is around 20%. Today, you have an order book of around 12, 13%. And at all time high, before the credit crisis in 2008, the order book was more than 50%. And given that the order book takes 3 to 4 to deliver, the amount of the order book is highly decisive for how the future supply side looks like.
Let's come to disrupting events or geopolitical events, such as what's happening at the moment in Suez or the war in Ukraine. In what ways has that changed shipping? How is shipping obliged to adapt to that? And what does that do to the cost of shipping?
I think ships has to move. As I said, 90% of all cargo is carried on water because there's no alternative. No one can carry goods more cheap or more eco-friendly than ships when it comes to transportation for volume. So everything the ship needs to go, and for shipping, there's always been a war or a disruptive event in the world somewhere. And if you look at the demand for shipping, it's not only driven by volume of cargo, it's also driven by the distance those cargoes have to go. So whenever you have disruptive events such as the Ukraine-Russian war, the result, not actually the war itself, but the sanctions that appeared from that means that usually oil products from Russia went to Europe. Europe was by far the largest importer of Russian oil products. That is now going to India or China, so a far larger distance. Whilst Europe, who used to get their products from Russia, needs to seek those products from longer away. So this has obviously a ton mile effect, which means that oil products all over the world has to go farther for every cargo, which then ties up supply. So that's why a big explanation why the tanker rates are very good at the moment is because of that disruption events. And you see the same on the container shipping, because 20% of all containers went through the Suez Canal last year. So when the Houthis starting attacking ships in going into Suez, that has made the ship owners go around the Cape, which again is a much longer distance than going through the canal. The effect of that is that about 10-11% of container ships has been absorbed by this extended journeys, which again drives rates up. So you can see for the container owners, they're making money now because of the disruptions in the Suez, and a lot of the tankers owners are making higher rates because of what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. And I think over time in shipping there are almost always some disruptive events everywhere, because in peacetime trade tends to be very efficient. The cargoes seeks to find the most efficient way of transport, and then the disruptive event messes with that, so creates a ton mile effect. So disruptive events gives higher shipping rates. That's just a fact.
Where are we in terms of cost relatively to historical averages for costs of shipping?
So it depends a little bit of what you're carrying, but in general, we are above average in terms of shipping costs at the moment, particularly driven by container rates and tanker rates on the product side. But also, I think the last decade from 29 to 2019, you had 10 years of very low earnings, which obviously has driven the average rate down. But currently, you are above average, and that's due to the supply side basically. I think this cycle is a what we call a supply driven cycle. The last super cycle we saw in shipping was from '02, '03 until '08, and was very much a demand driven cycle because of China generally joining the WTO in 2001 and had a tremendous growth, which meant importing a lot of commodities to fuel that growth. And then the yards followed after that with the ship owners with a lot of ordering at the yards. So as I said, that 2009, the order book was more than 50% of the sailing fleet, which basically took the shipping industry almost 10 years to absorb that structural overcapacity as a result from that. But today it's different. We have an order book around 12%, 13% maybe on average, and obviously dominated by certain segments such as gas carriers and very large container ships. If you look at crude tankers, you have an order book of maybe 6 or 7%, and for dry bulk ships maybe 8 or 9. So it's the supply side is actually looking quite favorable for shipping at the moment.
What kind of obligations are imposed upon you as ship owners to pursue ecological means to reduce the amount of energy you're consuming?
So shipping has a regulation body called the IMO, which is the United Nations regulation for shipping. In addition to that, you have obviously local regulations. EU, for instance, are very active. So the overall goal is obviously to reduce the emittance of greenhouse gases. I mean, shipping as a whole stands for about 3% of all carbon emissions today. You can argue that's a high number, and you can argue it's a low number, considering that you transport 90% of all the goods in the world. But the focus of the industry is obviously to get that number significantly down. Now, in the long term, obviously that involves new technology. You need to find alternative fuels, low emissions fuel, or beneficially non-emissions fuel, which is produced with renewable energy. In the short term, it means fuel efficiency. So you at least we have invested in some minor bulb optimization, propeller optimization, better coatings, which can reduce your fuel consumption with 15 to 20%. In addition to that, speeds are going down because anyone who knows a little bit about mechanical engineering knows that speed consumption is exponentially depending. So if you reduce speed and by that engine output by 10%, you reduce the fuel consumption with more. So the industry has reduced its speed by 10% the last 5 or 6, 7 years, which again reduces emissions. I think the continuous improvement is going to be the focus, and in the long run, that's going to be solved by technology. But in the short run, it's going to be solved by fuel efficiency and speed reductions.
So presumably, slower speeds increases the issue of supply, and
So
makes
it has
the
the same effect. Slower speed has the same effect as longer distances, right? So it ties up a bigger part of the fleet to carry the same amount of cargo. So yes, on lower speeds has a positive supply-demand effect for those who own ships.
So in fact, there's two effects that have changed really. There's longer distances, and now on top of that, there's slower speeds as well.
Indeed, and but I think the longer distances is at least for what's going on now is temporarily, while the slower speeds is going to be a longer lasting trend.
Okay, Wilhelm, thank you very much for that. I think that's all we've got time for. That's very kind of you to explain us the shipping business, and I hope we'll be talking about this at another time in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.